Thank you for joining us in person and online. Good to see familiar faces in the audience. So I might actually talk too quickly and wrap up early, if that's okay, or just make lots of time for open discussion too. That's not intentional, that's simply a habit of mine that I like to talk quickly. So the topics generally, what is TD research? What does it mean for end user engagement? What does it mean for the rest of the university? And in a way, this is sort of a mini relaunch event of TD School. So for context, let's try this one. There we go. TD could mean a whole bunch of different things. It's sort of an inside joke we're playing around with different acronyms that TD could represent. To us, it's often too new. There's just so much that can get done, but it is very much transdisciplinary. So for context, FTDI was created as a faculty established at 2016. So it's a very new organization. First time the university has created a new faculty in decades. It was launched off the back of a undergraduate course program, coursework foundation through which we teach students, and to another set of industry partners who join the classroom about transdisciplinary methods to collaborate towards innovation. Since then, we've been launching our HDR program and a few other new courses, and our research program is still evolving rapidly. A lot of us have come into this relatively new unit from different backgrounds, so from FAST, from business, from design, from science, from engineering. So a lot of us are actually individually still relatively transdisciplinary. But just to reinforce the VC's message that the faculty is transforming to a school. Think of this roughly in the same sense as the graduate research school. It's a university entity, structured, I guess, similar to a faculty, but really meant to help break down silos across faculties. Hopefully that will become clear as the talk goes on. Hi, Leslie. And so what TD is in a nutshell, the way we boil it down based on what we see in the international literature, is it's not, like, it has the word disciplinarity in there, but it's not just mixing academic disciplines. It's also mixing in multiple professional practices. So that's like the legal professions, engineering professions, the routines and behaviors that industry uses, right through to individual end users, like consumer level stuff. So I'll also push back a little bit about what an end user is. Is it just the industry partner, or is it the people who will ultimately use whatever product or service or innovation you're bringing out? I don't know if you've seen the Impact at UTS podcast series that was launched late last year. Had a bonus episode for the Vice Chancellor's Awards, the Research Awards. So here's some quotes from Stuart White and Cam that I've plucked out that provide two similar but very complementary takes on what TD is.
So, I mean, the problems are not chemistry problems or mathematics problems or engineering or sociology problems. They're just problems. And so we need a team of people with different disciplinary backgrounds.
So that's emphasizing the multiple academic disciplines in there. So to complement that,
it should be viewed from a systems point of view. That's the first and most important thing. The second is to do the research and design the research in a collaborative way to make sure that we are gaining knowledge from, firstly, the participants in the problem, which are often the clients and stakeholders, community, and so on. So to recognise that there are many different forms of knowledge. It doesn't just come from journal articles, which is often the focus of academic research, but it actually comes from stakeholders engaged in the activities that we're investigating. So that's the first thing, is to work very closely with clients and the stakeholders, to do it in a collaborative way, and then to make sure that that research is used in some way, that it's promoted, that it's communicated, that it's transparent, and that we're getting the fruits of that research, the outcomes of that research, out to the people who need to see it. So that's a piece about the production of knowledge and the communication of knowledge, and that's extremely important to us because A, it helps create change, and B, it's a responsibility of researchers to make sure that the outcomes and the fruits of their research are shared widely and do create that change.
So a few things that stick out for that one is it's the active involvement of the end users and the industry partners. It's not just doing the research and then translating it to them, but it's bringing them into the project almost right at the very beginning and designing the study with them. So you're designing the scope of the study with them. And the new knowledge that's being generated is co-produced with them. So it's not necessarily the academics doing their analysis and having these aha moments and saying, by the way, to your industry, have you noticed this? So that's kind of what TD research is. Why is it important, or when is it useful? The OECD published a nice report June last year, thankfully acknowledging UTS and its efforts, and it's often for complex societal challenges. So not every problem is suitable for transdisciplinary methods. Sometimes the degree to which you bring in industry partners and the professions and multiple disciplines overshoots the scope of a project. So that's where some projects might actually be better as interdisciplinary, monodisciplinary, et cetera. Case Doris, one of the professors in our faculty, describes some of the methods or methodologies around this as these are problem spaces that are open, complex, dynamic, and networked. So if you're dealing not just with a fixed problem, but something that is very complex and involves multiple moving parts, that's more likely to be amenable and yield more interesting results with TD research. So as a more concrete example, as an allergy sufferer, I like to pick on this one here. So sometimes you're just in there, you've got a problem, a runny nose, sneezing, whatever. So you say, Chris, I just want some tissues. But really, if you expand that to not just a problem, but a problem space and looking at the causes and consequences and all the parts moving involved in this, you can magnify this to a much larger societal level challenge. Some industry people are open-minded about this. They say, actually, wait, I do want to take a step back to see if I'm treating the symptoms or the causes. And other industry partners just say, look, I just want this algorithm or I just want the solution. So there's a bit of a give and take. And it's also the willingness to step into a space where you're not the expert with other industry partners. Some industry partners want to own a problem or challenge, and other ones are happy to involve others in the broadly spoken ecosystem, sometimes including their competitors too. This then also says, off the back of that, everyone comes into this with a different frame of mind. So each of those partners has their own methodology, their own frameworks, so like whether it's chemical, pharmacological, computational. So this is where the disciplinary perspectives sort of come through the perspective of the stakeholders. So really, when you're looking at a problem, take a step back to see, okay, is this the problem that you're looking at just a symptom of a much larger problem space? And that can help you think through the degree to which you might want to start adopting multi or cross-disciplinary or transdisciplinary methods. At the very end, I've got a good example where somebody has focused initially right on a very interesting problem, initially adopted an inter and cross-disciplinary perspective, when in reality, it effectively could have been managed as a transdisciplinary method. She's nonetheless yielded amazing results. I always wonder if she could have gotten those results faster or gotten even better results with a more nuanced approach. So use another quick soundbite.
These issues need to be solved. We can't stand by and continue to work in a model which is rarefied and separated from those pressing issues of the world and not be influenced by them and not take part in them. I think there is a general trend. We see that in certainly younger people coming through who want to have a purpose. They're much more purpose-driven rather than thinking, I'll have a standard academic career, PhD, postdoc, publications, lecturer, and so on. There's much more of a hunger for, I want to be making a change in the world, and that means I have to operate in a different way.
I like this quote because it picks on the motivations of the individual, and it also takes into consideration the stage of development. Some ECRs, they have that desire to change the system, not the climate, built in, except when they land their first academic job, then they're up against the traditional KPIs, so they've got to reconcile that. Mid-career researchers are probably almost a little bit of a lost cause, just trying to get to the next stage. Some of them are a bit more open-minded. Late career researchers are interesting. I was once part of a mentoring scheme where I had a full professor and we were reverse mentoring each other. And he basically said, look, I've already got the publications, I've got the grants, I've got the postdocs. What am I doing? I've got the patents. What am I doing? What am I doing with the rest of my career? how am I actually making society, improving society? So here's a quote back to the individual level that reinforces this one by Emma Camp, who's the Chancellor's Postdoctoral Research Fellow around the coral clip. Whoops, thought that was there's an audio link to that one. Yeah.
This is my passion. And I just can't bear the thought that I would have to tell my children that our generation knew that it was dying and didn't do anything to help it. I want to, through my research and my actions, ensure the reef is conserved into the future.
I mean, that kind of just screams that people choose a career usually for its purpose rather than just because they're good at it. And they can perform the traditional KPIs. All right, quick show of hands. I know there are only 4 of you plus online. How many of you have seen this framework? Oh, this is kind of a core part of the UTS research strategy. Conventional KPIs often just focus on the inputs, the grant dollars in, and the outputs, the publications out. What we're trying to do is change the conversation to say, actually, these outputs need to be translated, or you can do the research in a way that has the engagement built in, to then get to the point where you're achieving some sort of outcomes, actual, like commercial outcomes, societal outcomes beyond the academic outcomes, that then translate into some sort of impact right down at the human level, at the level of the individuals. So each of these matters. There is also, I guess, it's kind of screaming at you right there that this is a cycle, go from inputs to outputs and then translate them further and generate the goodwill. Therefore, you get better industry engagement, people who are more likely to fund your next round of research, and then the virtuous cycle continues. But that's not necessarily the case that it's a cycle. So you can embed engagement right into the research project rather than do the research and then engage with industry to say, hey, how'd you like to use my findings? So that's one thing here. Is one of the key parts of TD research is it's with people rather than for people. And like I just wrapped up a research project with the local council, and interestingly, they almost had that assumption built in that, well, we're commissioning you to do the research. Can you just do it and check in with us from time to time and tell us the results at the end? But the fun part is, as we get to the end, then they want to iterate very quickly on the report. Oh, can you do this bit? And did you do this bit? It's like, well, actually, we could do that all the way along and consider you as a collaborator, an active collaborator on the research project. So this is straight out of a 2015 article that they're reviewing the impact of co-production of knowledge using transdisciplinary methods. And they're finding, yes, it has higher stakeholder engagement. That's almost by definition built into TD. Therefore, it also has higher knowledge integration. So industry partners who are participating, as that new knowledge is being generated, they're able to integrate it faster and change their practices. And that then leads to the use of that knowledge too. But there are, like, TD is not easy. Like, you could say, great, just involve people early on and iterate with them faster. But it's not that easy. Like, there's a reason why it's a bit challenging. There are actually, I forget what DARPA stands for again, but they've got a classification of DARPA hard, of problems that are by definition very difficult because they require multi-year transdisciplinary methods, that there is no known answer. And the DARPA hard criteria almost completely match the criteria that were spelled out off the back of a major transdisciplinary summit that was summarized in this article, where they said, okay, like, let's define complex problems in with a bit more specificity, and the challenges of exploring complex problem spaces. So one of them is just defining, where do you set the boundaries? Is it, I just need a tissue, or is it the whole of society and medical practices and medical regulations and everything? Then the next 2 bullet points almost work against each other. You've got to figure out, okay, once you've specified who is in or out of this problem space, how do you determine who's the expert in that space? But then how do you park their expertise? Because you don't want somebody who's too loud in that space saying, I'm the expert, I know all the answers. You want people to be bringing their expertise into a space, but also be humble that they don't have the solution, that they're recognizing the expertise of everyone else in the room equally. So in the podcast, you'll hear them talk a bit more as a deliberate democracy. So as you bring people into a workshop, you have to let them recognize anywhere down from the end user, the individual, like the person who needs the tissue, has an equal voice in making sense of this whole societal-wide issue, as do government authorities, medical practitioners, et cetera. Every voice matters. The next bit is to then whittle it back down to say, okay, now that we've gone wide to embrace everyone and everything that could be part of the problem space, is to then say, okay, what's within our control? What levers can we pull? And which levers are completely beyond our control? What can't we change just yet? And also looking at even just what's the next step? You know, we might not be able to solve the entire issue, but can we at least iterate on this and conduct a smaller test and contain the issue a bit more? Let's look at allergy treatment within one isolated rural area before expanding out to the whole of Australia. And then they're also into, so that's just, TD is hard because of the nature of the complex problems that you're addressing, but then it's also institutionally difficult. That there are structural issues that can make it challenging for TD research to happen. Such as traditional KPIs that prescribe the list of journals that you should be publishing in, that quantify the number of publications and citations you're collecting. So the journals you're publishing in may not necessarily have that same, like land the same citations that your supervisors or deans may be looking for. And some KPIs actually favor not monodisciplinary journals, but also sole authored publications. So you collect more of the herd-C points. But transdisciplinary stuff, because you're involving so many people who are co-producing knowledge, tend to have more co-authors. So there is some tension between traditional KPIs, which actually aren't that old, and TD research. And then also things like FOR codes. If you're developing a grant or an ethics application, who are you going to ask to review it? That's usually specified through the FOR code structures. So there are challenges with that one too. I think there is an interdisciplinary FOR code, but it's just not well thought through. Some of that then has implications for workload models. And some people also question, like, where's the methodological rigor? Because when you're exploring a problem space with all these stakeholders, your research is so context specific that it might not be portable to another context. So your findings might not be portable to another context, but hopefully the method of exploring a complex context is more replicable. Bit of a mouthful. But we'll get to the TD research methodologies versus, I guess, doing TD research versus pushing the frontier of research methods, TD research methods. We'll try and separate those a bit more. The agenda of this here is more just to encourage people to do more TD research using the current best practices of TD methods, while I'm personally pushing within TD school to get our academics to push the frontier of TD methods. And I'll visualize that in a little bit later. So how and when research happens, it happens through this deliberate democracy. It often just simply requires listening to the end user, listening to each other. That takes time. You can't force it. You can't, have somebody in there saying, innovate, be creative, transdisciplinary. Just not going to happen. The moments at which you get that convergence of knowledge or synthesis of knowledge, and those moments where you actually are generating new knowledge, you're not going to have that for months and months and months on time. You can provide the opportunities for people to have those opportunities to generate new knowledge. You can't force them. So TD research can kind of go through these waves of ebbs and flows. Quite often it's the most transdisciplinary part of it is when you're meeting with clients, consultants, industry partners, and actually scoping out what the project is. That's where you're having so much dialogue back and forth that process of scoping the project is to some extent the transdisciplinary phase of it. Then you might go off and do your bit and then go through second phase of transdisciplinary research and reviewing the intermediate results or the final results, and then trying to collectively make sense of what's going on of a situation. So the level of transdisciplinarity on a project can go through several ebbs and flows. There are some long laundry lists of methods. A lot of them are related to qualitative research methods to really tease out people's impressions, opinions, Because at the end of the day, you're looking for things that have impact on society, which involves people, which inherently involves perceptions and subjective realities rather than objective realities. So we've got Kay Storrs, who's championing the frame creation method, which is based on design philosophy. And Case wrote up basically what we do in the BCII, which is more of a mixing and mashing up of methods. So you take methods and you experiment with them to try and evolve them. The next two blocks of methods here are based on that summit, where they synthesize and summarize all the methods out there. A lot of these are kind of systems level methods, but the nuance of what makes them TD is more in how you apply them and who you're applying them with. I mean, you could apply these just about anywhere and that wouldn't have to be TD, but it's the nature of which stakeholders you involve and when you involve them that then enables that co-production of the knowledge with those stakeholders. Through which, I guess, the new knowledge then transcends the academic disciplines to be a new knowledge contribution. Hence the word trans in there. So it's transcending the disciplines, not merging them. It's already happening across UTS. So I don't know if you've seen the university's webpage, UTS.edu. You just go to research and Explorer, and there's a separate tile for transdisciplinarity. That research webpage is no longer laid out according to faculty. It's laid out according to societal problems. And within transdisciplinarity, again, more societal problems and complex problems. So a lot of these foci are plucked straight from that page. So ISF is quite well known in this space, more on the approach of sustainability and energy. You've got the climate change cluster that has their own, I guess, context in which they apply it. The Digital Science, TSI, Digital Science Innovation Institute, sorry, Digital Science Institute. They've got a project in there that's more around digital learning. Antimicrobial resistance is also kind of one of these big things. It's not just about the bacteria, but it's the use of methods and processes to contain that. KIC has mentioned in there around human-centered design versions of learning and data analytics. So this mixing up of AI, machine learning, data analytics, and the human side of it. You heard earlier from Ken talking-wise from Dirk and Doc. They've got a huge plethora of very diverse projects, each involving a separate complex problem. Within TD School, we're focusing on 4 themes. So futures, sustainable societies, technology, humanity. So it's sort of ethics and AI fits in that one as well. And transformative learning. So hopefully in the near future, you'll be hearing more from us on those. Our website has just been refreshed this last week, which has more specific case studies and projects on those. And you'll notice a lot of these are at the level of a unit in UTS. But there are, of course, many, many individuals and their collaborators and teams who do transdisciplinary research. So it's happening. The question to UTS is how do we coordinate it in a more sophisticated way rather than just letting it mushroom? This is what TD research is not. So I plucked the figure out of one of Paul Nightingale's articles. So he's one of the directors of SPRU, the Science Policy Research Unit in the UK. They do a lot of kind of this deep thinking about the paradigms in science. And this article is more about inter and multidisciplinary research. And if it's just taking a problem and dissecting it and looking at it from different disciplines and everyone looking at it from their own perspective, you're not actually getting people to have that shared language and that lingua franca of like, what is it as a whole that we're looking at? So that's more inter and multidisciplinary, cross and multidisciplinary, where it's largely coordination of individual sub-projects almost. What we're leaning towards, so here it's still phrased as interdisciplinary, but I'd say it borders on transdisciplinary, is that there's some team or some unit in the middle of this green tile here that actually is a synthesis of multiple academic disciplines. Where this would then become transdisciplinary is where it's not just the integration of multiple disciplines, but also involving more of the end user and the co-production of knowledge with the end user. So in that regards, this is still interdisciplinary. In the short term, TD School will aim to be more of a broker. simply because we are a tiny unit and the rest of the university is huge. But as we build capacity, we will have more staff and more people who can really help lead those projects and be a central contributor to these university-wide projects. Okay, so remember the slide from before? So this is why it's not quite transdisciplinary. So it's, yes, it is mixing of the academic knowledges, not just coordinating them, but it's not quite on the mixing, integrating of the academic or the professional practices.
Can I ask a question?
Yep,
so,
of course.
The interdisciplinary, where that is, so I would have thought that would be covered by all these institutes we have, you know, the CIC and the AI Institute and the
yep.
So if they're not engaged in industry, they should be.
So this is where it'll get interesting in about 4 slides of what does applied interdisciplinary or applied multidisciplinary research look like, where it is mixing of 1 or more or 2 or more disciplines and it's applied. When we're doing research on Robert Langer, the world's most cited, most patented, most published engineer to date, like he's the Edison of medicine. He, like one thing that stood out is that he actually fits the Pasteur typology quite nicely, that he is looking for very basic research questions, but also applying them right away. So he's kind of the brains behind Moderna as well, which is kind of helping him get more exposure. He's raised billions of dollars, launched dozens of startup companies in the process, runs the world's largest research lab at MIT. When I was looking for research on Pasteur's quadrant, turns out there's Tijssen has got this fresher version, which is actually not just applied versus basic, but the level of engagement as well. So the depth of engagement with industry partners kind of comes through. You can still be in Pasteur's quadrant, thinking about the application of your research, but not necessarily engaging with the end users. So the more you actually engage with the end users in industry and immerse yourself in that applied environment, the more you're likely to I guess, slide or gravitate towards TD. Yep. Not sure. I'm not that familiar with that organization just yet, but I happen to have a look at them. They're the ones who collaborate with across the universities, but also with CommBank.
Yeah,
I think.
there's 4 years they just combined their quantum stuff.
Yep.
And then they brought out a house over it, so the government gave them $5 million.
Yeah. The question is, are they?
It's quite a niche sort of community, so they collaborate well.
So it's lots of researchers coming together. Yep. So the question is, what's the level of involvement with them? Are they just throwing money into it, or are they actually like actively collaborating? Okay, so then, yeah, it could be transdisciplinary if they're inventing a science of quantum computing, not just science of molecular physics. Good question. Hopefully my next couple of visualizations will pop that out. So this review of researchers, what they did is they looked at a global data set of scientists and engineering, I guess researchers in sciences and engineering, and categorized them according to their activities, whether they're just publishing or whether they're publishing and patenting, whether they're involved in the commercialization cycles, to categorize them in this 3-dimensional typology. And what they found is the more you're up in the top right, you will actually have more publications. So that actually does start to play into traditional KPIs. You will then also have more co-authorship. So simply because you're collaborating more, but your collaborations will also be more international and involve more non-academics. Yeah, and it just kind of becomes this sort of self-perpetuating engine of research excellence with impact, true to the tagline of the UTS research strategy. And more field-weighted research citations too. One of the conceptual limitations of this here is it still emphasizes the solo entrepreneur, the solo academic scientists, that it is actually a team effort, and that comes through the metrics of co-authorship. So back to those definitions, so teasing out a bit more nuances. So it's the mixing of the academic knowledges, but not just coordinating them, but really aiming for them to be integrating and talking a common language. And also pulling in collaborators from industry and end users across multiple sectors, not just a Microsoft, but maybe multiple people, and co-designing it. So getting the industry stakeholder and user involvement as early as possible. and recognizing there is some jargon difference between who the end user is. I think research office looks at the end user as whoever is paying your level of research, but that's not necessarily who will be the end beneficiary of the research. So if you're following for research ethics, you often have to think in terms of beneficients. That then starts to get more at like who's the actual person at the end of the day who will benefit from the research. So in terms of, so how can TD School help? So we've started off circling back to the very beginning, like what's the history of TD School? We started off as starting off a coursework program for students to learn transdisciplinarity, now also at the master's level, in short courses. So we've got that dialed in, so it's built into students' curriculum, not just bolted on. So we're launching a set of transdisciplinary electives that students will take in their second year. That way they're thinking about transdisciplinary applications of their own knowledge or practices of their own knowledge by the time they graduate, rather than this random thing that happens just before they graduate and they're just looking for their job. And so what UTS is trying to do is think that through at the university level too. How do we enable even some researchers to become more sophisticated in terms of designing the research in a way that has that impact and engagement built in from the beginning rather than bolted on at the end. So TD School is well poised to be that pan-university center. So almost like the TD extension of ResHub, effectively, to help anyone across UTS learn more about TD research and do more TD research. And we can then almost study those researchers as our guinea pigs to evolve the methodology behind TD research. So this is where I hope it just kind of really clarifies some things. So everyone's familiar with, there's a person at faculty, a faculty F in this case, and they're just simply working on their disciplinary knowledge. Fantastic, good on them. Good way to maybe start a career, build a foundation within your discipline. Then it might be industry funded or interacting with industry. They get new ways of working out of it. So that's applied disciplinary research. Then you get multidisciplinary research where there might be somebody coordinating it, but there's a big problem. Might not have to be a complex problem, simply a complicated problem that can be broken down, and people working at it from multiple angles. That visualization comes back into mind. Then this is where things get interesting. If it's still just coordinating of taking a larger problem and breaking it down into bits and pieces and having industry partners input from time to time, that's not necessarily the co-production of knowledge. If it's still just breaking things down and coordinating it, it would still just be applied multidisciplinary research. Once you get through to actually bringing in the industry partners as equals into a project and co-producing the knowledge with them, that's when it then flips over to something that's transcending those disciplines to generating new knowledge. And so what we're aiming for is, in a way, building the capacity within TD School and therefore also at UTS to help coordinate and do this type of research so that we can find the academics across UTS. I think we now have about 800 industry partners within our school alone, many of whom are already friendly to TD research or TD methods through the coursework industry partnerships. And can we coordinate other people who are interested in this, industry partners who are interested in this, bring them into a common space, and we get the team to do the research while we study the process of the research. That way we push the frontier on the transdisciplinary research methods. Academics can push their disciplinary knowledge, industry partners walk away with their new ways of working. There are two ways about this. One is kind of self-serving. TD School has these 4 research areas. So for those research areas, we're declaring them as our research foci because we have expertise in them. So we're more likely to have not just the process expertise of collaborating, but also some subject matter expertise, and we'll pull in any missing subject expertise from friendly folks around the rest of the university, working with the industry partners, of course. Then the next bit, which we're aiming to get to, is kind of powered by or supported by TD School, where maybe all we need to do is play more of a brokerage model, play a role in the design of the methods, evaluate the impact of the methods or the outcomes of the methods, really push the methodological advancement, while we have another TD partner in there to do more of the doing of TD research rather than the evaluation of TD research. If that makes sense. See some heads nodding, but also maybe question marks. So that's the grand master plan of where we're hoping to get to in it, and possibly the short term for smaller projects, but also eventually the longer term as we grow. So how can TD School help? Coming soon, hopefully brokering these relationships with our industry partners and making that a two-way flow, that we can partner with academics and industries and make them go back and forth. So we'll try and make liberal use of the space to do that too. So Kate, ResHub, if you're watching, thanks for the space. You'll hear more of us soon. Also working on the TD project management side. So some researchers just want to do the research, and that's fine. They don't necessarily want to chase the grants. They don't want to have to manage the relationships with the funders. We can potentially take on more of that role too, more sliding a bit more on the administrative side. But also doing that research design with you. So think of it like an internal research consultant, where one of our staff members comes and joins your research team, informs you how to do the research better, maybe checks in with you every once in a while, and sees how it's going. So that's helping the research design for the team, ideally also with the team. Pet project of mine that I'd like to get to is evaluating some of these existing research projects that are happening across UTS to see how did they apply the methods and how could they have applied it better, or to which degree are people already doing TD research. So that video clip you saw earlier was Emma Camp. So this is off the website that recently featured her and grasping for names, but the Professor David Suggett's work. So the two of them are working on this here. There's an Impact at UTS podcast episode on them as well. And what really stood out as we developed that podcast episode is, yes, they're focusing on the coral clip, which lets you take a piece of coral, reattach it to the coral, and it'll regrow. But what's happened out of that, while focusing on this product and the regrowth of a small piece of coral, is they've actually ended up working with a lot of the Great Barrier Reef Foundation and a lot of tourism operators, and they've changed the structure of the tourism industry there. Tourists don't just show up and go to the reef, take pictures and leave. They actually show up, feel good about participating in coral farming and creating the coral reef, and get charged for the privilege of it. Yeah, so they're transforming the ecotourism industry. So in effect, that is so engaged with the end users that I would say this is fits within that criteria of being transdisciplinary research. It might be slow motion transdisciplinary research that's evolved over time, but I would happily say that's this is an amazing example of it. Now the science that is coming out of it is largely marine biology and very biological research, not necessarily research about the methods, the collaboration methods through which they got to this point. So I'd love to pick their brains and write up tell me the story of how you got the government to help you fund 100,000 corals to be planted, all during COVID times as well. And lastly, active collaboration with the inner team. So not just being this consultant to a team to say, here's how you could be a bit more transdisciplinary, but actually implanting, having somebody being sort of an interloper within research projects and being actively involved in projects that are outside our four foci. And of course, true to TD methods, I'm open for discussion, open for suggestions. Like if you see opportunities to co-create, the opportunities to collaborate, and how TD School can help you, I'm all ears. So I think that's it. So I was going to say watch this space, but watch the space suggests that you're just sitting there passively watching. Let's co-design the space.